Good afternoon and welcome to our webinar, a mini Kaizen event selecting a provider. Not all black belt training is created equal. I would like to go over a few logistical things about today's webinar. All participants are muted, so we cannot hear you, so please send any of your questions through the GoToWebinar toolbox on your screen, and we will gladly answer any questions at the end of the webinar. So please send them throughout the webinar, and Rick will get to them at the end. Also, there will be a recording of this session that will be available on our website within 48 hours. We will send you an email with link and access information tomorrow, so be sure to look out for that. We also had scheduled two speakers today, Forrest Breyfogle and Rick Haynes. However, Forrest wasn't able to join us today, but we are pleased to have Rick speaking to us about these black belt training options. Also, please know that as a participant in this webinar, you will be contacted by Smarter Solutions. If you do not wish to be contacted, please signify that at the end of the webinar during the survey, and just check the box and we will not contact you. I will now introduce our presenter, Rick Haynes. Rick is a 19-year Lean and Six Sigma practitioner and one of Smarter Solutions' senior instructors. Through his career, he is certified as a Master Black Belt, Champion, and Yellow Belt, along with teaching and certifying professionals in all the Lean Six Sigma areas. His personal Lean Six Sigma work has spanned nearly all business types: manufacturing, transactional, along with a research and development business. He is a master's degree statistician and has taught statistics in the Penn State University system. He has worked in all levels of business from entry-level up to a site engineering manager. His life experiences and skills will provide you with an engaging discussion of what you might consider in searching for your black belt training provider. I will now turn this over to Rick Haynes.
Hello everybody, this is Rick. Thank you for taking the time to listen up. Because of the time zones and where you are, you may or may not be at lunch. Thank you for coming. I think we're all on line right now. This topic is about picking a black belt. As my role as a Master Black Belt here at Smarter Solutions, I end up talking to a lot of people about this because it is really tough deciding where to go get trained if you think you need it. First thing we have is a question here. If you just tell me why you're coming to this webinar, help us decide a little bit what are the demographics and what to do to talk about. Because I got the slides, but we can talk about anything along the way. So please choose one of these four. We'll see how it comes out. At the end, you will all see the result. Let's see, what are we doing? You can't tell, but I have to put my glasses on to see this. Looks like we're getting, oh, there we go. There's the results. Both of them are, it looks like almost half of you are looking at getting certification, and some are looking to train others. This is great. There's a lot of reasons to be listening here. This is generally a lot of money to get trained. And we're going to talk about some of the things to look at. And I'll admit now, one, there is not probably a single black belt program that is right for everybody. So we're going to talk about today in a little idea of a little improvement session. This is the kind of stuff you might learn in your course if you take it. We're talking about different aspects, teaching methods, instructional methods, what certification means a little bit, content and applicability. If you have questions, you don't have to wait till the end. The earlier you ask them, we'll collect them and talk about it, because there's always a lot about what's certification worth. We'll move along. And the last one is what you may not know that you need to know. Black belt is a lot of things. One of the weaknesses in all this is there is no real exact idea of what a black belt is. It isn't like some trainings and certifications where everybody gets trained the same way. I get a lot of different questions about this. Sometimes you just have to take the ASQ exam, and that makes you a black belt. That's the American Society of Quality. You turn in a bunch of papers promising that you did a lot of other work, and they give you your certification. Sometimes it's just learning tools. Some people just say, hey, it's just stuff I already know. Some complain that it's just statistics. But probably the one that's the toughest is the person who calls, and all they want to do is get black belt on their resume so they can look for their next job. Now, if that's your goal, you can almost get the same by walking out and printing a certificate for yourself and just say you're self-certified. But there really is a lot more to it. Where did it go over the years? I'll admit I'm old. And when black belt training started, I got it from Motorola back in the first wave of efforts. Started in the late 80s. And a black belt was the facilitator for work teams to help them do better at their improvement. So they really were called black belts because they had all the tools at their hand and they could apply the right one at the right time. But we didn't run projects, we just helped people. And it was not so focused on the making money, it was just for driving the Sigma level and things like that. It was to improve the performance of the organization. Later came General Electric. They really pushed run projects. They introduced all the other belts, the yellow belts, the white belts, the blue belts, I've heard, change processes. But I think now it's applied to all Lean and Six Sigma practitioners. So even black belt training, or black belt term itself, isn't equally used for everybody. All right, I'm just waiting for the screen to update here. There we go. So let's talk about what smarter solutions, and I think it's a relatively upper end view of what a black belt should be and what they should learn. Generally, we see a black belt as a person who should be trained to be able to walk independently into an area that they may or may not be known and lead and facilitate an improvement effort. So it's about leading and facilitating business teams. The next one's really about the soft skill of managing change adoption within an organization. If you haven't learned it by now, just facts is not enough sometimes to get good things to happen. There's more to it. They have to be able to build processes and documents and make their changes permanent. They do have to be taught how to collect and interpret data, and then how to communicate. Because if you can't communicate what you're doing, it's not much benefit. People don't listen either. So that's really what we're going to talk about. Now, a green belt, again, it's like all these other terms, is not represented the same by all providers. But we see a green belt as somebody who has got the same set of problem-solving skills. Well, I guess not the same as a black belt. Maybe one layer deep, but it's without a lot of soft skills. They're expected to be team leaders and facilitators of change, but they do it within their current discipline. So they're already known and respected, and they don't need as many soft skills in change management and stuff to drive change. Generally, green belts are not very successful by themselves. They usually have to be supported by an experienced black belt or a master black belt to help with the complex nature of data collection and analysis when it does come up. So green belts are like the 80% solution. So in this webinar, we're really talking about the black belt side. To kick this off, we wanted to do it as like a little improvement event. So what we did is when you signed up, we collected information from you of what you thought was important in a black belt training program. It was a great list. I'll admit I put together one just in case nobody gave much input, and didn't catch everything. You guys are the ones that participated, gave a real good set of inputs, and you see what they are here. What we're going to do is we're going to put them on a fishbone diagram. This is another, probably a TQM or Total Quality Management tool from back a long time ago. Another name is an Ishikawa diagram, but if you can see it, sort of looks like a fish. The head says quality of a black belt course, and then we've got 7 bones that we will put ideas on. All right. So I picked the categories. Now this is a short list. It's not everything everybody put in, but pretty soon you get to too small of fonts. so it's not readable. This may not be readable anyway. But we got a lot of inputs. We condensed these down, since some of them were a little bit long, into this cause and effect diagram. So we had things in the usefulness, things about certification, the focus of the course, and such. Now, what we would do is, starting with this, the next thing is to prioritize and reduce the list down and see what it says. So I'm going to walk through each of the 7 bones now. We'll talk about each one. Another time for you to ask questions if they come up. But I'll start with the teaching methods, because how things are taught is a key thing on how good the course is going to be. The tough part is all people don't learn the same way. What you can find out there is instructor-led courses. Those generally are probably the more expensive ones, because you are paying for a quality instructor's time to go do that. There's online courses that are purely online. They're generally less expensive, but again, you have to do self-paced learning and be able to take the time and concentration and learn basically from a computer screen. Now, what's in courses? There's experiential and hands-on exercises. That really drives learning. One-on-one discussions with a instructor or coach. There's self-paced ones. There are a lot of reading, questions, and workbooks. And I guess another one that came up was that the classes were very participative. In other words, you can talk back and forth. You've got, the way I read in this, you've got some exercises you do as a group, some as individuals. There's breakout times. You answer questions, but it's more part of the group exercise. If I run through those, the whole participative is probably one of the biggest ones. It also came up big on the inputs from you people in the webinar, and that it really does matter to have an engaging type of teaching. Good courses, they mix all genres of teaching. You'll have notes to read, articles to read, and textbook to read. You'll have pure lectures that you listen. You'll have experiential things that you're given a problem to go solve right there with guidance. You should have one to take home and do on your own, and there should be some type of data generation in the class, and most use a catapult, as we do, to generate data in a random manner that you can see the pattern in it. We can watch all the tools be applied against it. I know in our course we actually run a small improvement project on the catapults itself as if it was your project. That way you can apply the tools right there in class and get a better feel for them. Next bone we'll look at is materials. I know one of my pet peeves whenever I took courses when I was at other employers is they give you a nice little book with fancy slides, but as soon as I get back to my office, I throw all the paper out, save the binder, and use it for something that'll benefit me. But the notes themselves were not valuable or useful without the instructor talking. And so that's a tough one. It's very hard to judge that when you pick providers. But generally, you should have handouts that are usable. Ours try to stand alone, so you can go back to your room at night or your home and redo the whole lecture without an instructor there. So you'd like one that has enough content that you can use it. They should have reference books. Another one that came up often. People complain that they just have a lecture that once you walk away, you don't have anything to go back to reaffirm it or to follow it up. So having a book that matches the course makes it a heck of a lot easier. Cross-reference is a big one too. And I picture that as we do, where the notes have got references to a book, so you can go look up and get a more detailed reading. You've got handouts that are all referenced back to the material or to the notes or to a roadmap. But every piece of material you're given as a student is cross-referenced. So if you remember one place, you can get to all of them by following the references. Another one that, oddly enough, you see a lot of people talk about, and it came up in the inputs less than I had expected, but that it's taught in a logical sequence. Those of us that have taken college courses have seen sometimes they follow a nice pattern, sometimes the instructor jumps all over the place and follows their thought pattern, but not one that leads the students to have a logical thought process. And after seeing more than one way to do it, I realized that's a really big one too. Next, we'll talk about certification. I do admit some people come through these classes and don't care about certification. But in reality, everybody should. Certification in itself doesn't mean anything other than it's a demonstration of your proficiency. There are many ways to certify, and generally anybody can teach a black belt class and give you a certification. There are no prerequisites. Things to ask, though, is the certification included in the course or is it extra? Probably a good third of the ones out there that look like they're good deals charge you an extra $1,000 for certification and extra money for coaching and answering questions. It's even in some cases. There's only a few of those. But how do they certify? There are basically three ways people have certification process. One is they have to run 1 or 2 demonstrated proficient projects using the DMAIC model. Some of them have a test. That's what ASQ does. You tell them you did a project and just take a test. And some do it through an interview or a one-on-one coaching process. The goal in all is to demonstrate proficiency that you can use the tools outside of the classroom. They're all reasonable ways to go, but again, it matters more on what you need as a person to help you along. Generally, people lead to the ones that have a project or the better ones. Not having a project or one that you run on a simulation generally is a second-tier certification. What you may not know is those who are looking for black belts to starting up programs generally know which of the programs out there are pretty good. And so a lot of times if you try to use this in hiring, they'll ask who certified you, and there are some out there that are a little shady. So it's a tough one to know when you get there. Next one's content. I mean, what should be in the course? If you didn't know it, the best, or really it's the only body of knowledge out there is provided from the ASQ or American Society of Quality. They list a set of competencies that they believe a black belt should know, and they publish that as an effort to say, here's what our class holds. But it probably is the best one out there. 2 years ago, it actually changed. They dropped a whole bunch of stuff that I thought was important so they could sneak in some. That's not fair. So they could add more lean and go from a Six Sigma program to a lean Six Sigma program. But what do you really need? And my belief, if you just get the minimum body of knowledge, you're getting maybe an 80% solution. You probably need more. And as I teach this, I think it's my 3rd set of curricula here for Smarter Solutions. 4 full weeks of instructor-led training are barely enough to cover all the things that you probably need. Nobody really said time in class is one of their issues, but you can see black belt classes that take from 2 weeks to 5 weeks. 4 weeks is common. The ones that are online seem to be only 40 to 50 hours of online training, which is tough because really a 4-week course is over 200 hours of discussions and time, not counting the project support and the coaching. So you have to decide what you need. Now, good programs, if they do cover more than the body of knowledge, they're going to have to talk about continuous improvement and root cause analysis, which really are other tools that round out your abilities. The Lean Six Sigma stuff is great tools for fixing chronic and long-term problems, but root cause analysis tools are more efficient at fixing event-based, this is the one time it happened, such as an accident. And then the continuous improvement and plan, do, study, act type stuff, that's for when you want to have slow, incremental, evolutionary improvement working on in a work group. It's a great tool to turn over at the end of a project with a control plan, and that's how we teach it. Now, it should probably include Lean and Six Sigma. We have a slide later that shows sort of how we got to both, the history of what comes up to the best-in-class programs right now. But there used to be Lean training in Six Sigma. You really should see both because the Lean tools, although you think of manufacturing, they are more effective in the service industry, outside of manufacturing than they are in, mostly because no one's applied them there. Six Sigma the same way, it's thought of as a quality program, but its tools are really good on any chronic problem. The last one that came up, surprisingly higher than we expected in your inputs, was soft skills. I know I condensed them down, but this is change management, team leadership, not the hard skills you'd assign to someone in a Six Sigma course. And I do believe those are far more important than we give them generally, because if you really believe those are part of what you need to train to lead good improvement teams, you generally hardly ever get that from the online or the short courses. That's one thing they cut really quick. So the question is, what do you really need? Next one is the focus of the training. If you scan the internet, there's lots of options. There are some that say they've got the manufacturing spin, the transactional spin, one for service industries, healthcare, Six Sigma for A, B, and C. What's interesting, though, is when I have looked at some of those, and they aren't that much different. The big one we miss is in manufacturing, they don't give you anything really but normal distributions and two-sided specification examples. And in the transactional service or others, they generally don't have specifications, or if they do, they're one-sided, and you hardly ever have normally distributed data. So a lot of them you see, all they really do is relabel stuff. They really aren't that different. Our belief is that there really is a set of tools, and any spin you put on it may limit you on what you're actually getting. Because even in manufacturing, once you leave the manufacturing floor, the purchasing, the HR, finance group, the safety organization, the maintenance organization, they're all dealing with the same kind of data that you'd see in a transactional or service industry. So in reality, you do need both, not just one. I looked down the list. A number of people said they want a black belt course to include implementation, business aspects, and we did see a number of inputs about it should relate to the business, not just the project. One of our words is some classes focus downward in the business just at the problem, and you're just taught to solve a problem. The better courses turn you around and look upward into the business and have the student asking, why am I solving it? If I solve this, how will the company know this is a benefit? You spend more time on the business relationship than you do on just solving the problem. It does slow things down a bit, but you end up with a student in the end that has a lot better concept of how to help the business than just to solve a problem. Now, other. This is the list I didn't know how to group, and that's why you always put an other on your fishbone. But some interesting question. How long has the provider been around? I think you'll not find one that's over 20 years. It didn't occur. There was only one back then. Generally 15 to 17, 18 years, about as long as any of them have been around. That's when the second wave of Six Sigma came out, and Lean started around that time. There's only 4 or 5 original ones. Everything's spun off since then. Again, if a provider, I guess I could leave this company now and put my website up and be a provider with 1 year of experience. The reason you care about how long they've been around really is the quality of the material. If you've ever tried to inspect or redo people's writings, it's hard to get mistakes out unless you've been at it a while. Cost only came up once on all the inputs from the students, from this webinar, but generally we tell you to consider the total cost of the course, not just tuition, but there's travel, time away from work, and it also leads into what you should do on a project. If you're doing a project, you should look at the total cost of solving it, not just look at what you save. So we cover that in the course, but cost is an issue. Where is it taught? There's advantages to being local, and there's advantages to traveling. I usually lean towards the traveling in the fact that when you're at a course away from town, they can't drag you back into work. You go back to your room, you have time to practice and think, and you get to focus more on learning. I'll probably finish on mixture of students. There's a tough one. It depends what you want. Some people like to have a homogeneous group from the same company, but my feelings on it is a class that's more open, that you can see questions that are outside of your paradigm from your business. It allows you to open up your mind some and realize that a manufacturing firm and a firm that handles pallets and one that works with high schools to reduce electric bills, they're all looking at the problems almost the same way and have same issues. So a mixture of students from different genres and different segments of business really does help you. Usefulness. Probably the number one thing that came across from all of your inputs before this session was it better be useful when you're done. And those are my paraphrase of it. but it needs to have a very practical business focus. It needs to be very oriented towards applying the tools, not just the theory of them. And communication came up. That in the end, you should be taught not only how to solve it, but how to communicate what you're doing to drive engagement. And I roll these all up to do with this. When you're all done, can you use it? Because I'll tell you, if it's only in the head and you get the theory, putting that on paper and solving a problem isn't that easy. So I've been through the inputs from the students or the people here in this seminar and added some in of my own. So what do we do next? Now we've got a list. The next goal is to take these, judge them against your business's interests or needs or the business side. Because I'll tell you, if you don't go into this for help, the business side of it, you miss some of the opportunities. And we're going to do this with a cause and effect matrix, another tool from the class. It's a tool that's been around forever. Some people call it a prioritization matrix. But I chose 4 different sessions for us talking around the office to put this together. But the number one thing of a black belt training class is it should benefit the business. Next would be it's a good learning experience. So in other words, the person in the class gains from it personally too. The next one we came out of these is, and you can't teach everything. So we think that a black belt class should provide you the ability to continue learning after class ends and between, which a lot focuses on the material that you have and the support that you have after class. And the last one is the certification benefit. There really is a benefit to certification because it does show people you are willing to go, spend the time, do it right, and you have at some level showed an ability to use it. All right? The way this works, you pick the weighting, they're the red numbers on the top, how I'm going to weight the characteristics the business will care about. Then down the left-hand side in each row is one of the items off the cause and effect diagram. And you run across the line there and you score the relationship of that item to the column. The math, if we look at the top row, is coaching included with the class. We have benefits to business. I gave an 8. 1 means not much. 10 means very strongly supports. But having a coach helps you understand the business side of it and relate the student back to the business. A good learning experience. Generally, coaching provides a better learning experience because you can actually go, do I get it? Does this make sense? Or you can pose your own hypothetical question and they say yes or no. Self-learning, that's what coaching is about, a lot of it. So if you have coaching, you have better self-learning between and after classes. And with certification, we find that if you had a coach, your certification generally is more beneficial. So we run down these. What you do is you multiply each of the numbers times a weight and sum them up. And you can see the totals on the right. What we do is we take the top ones generally and look at the bottom ones, see what they mean. Now, the top ones on this scoring method, you can read them here. Coaching, has a project, very experienced teachers, able to communicate it. And the bottom ones, so do it and communicate it. A lot of application and practical nature of it, relationship to the business. The history term was to relate to the company as a history, so that they've been around and their tools are tested and true. Mixture of students, as you can get out, the bottom one's a clear roadmap. That leads towards a very logical sequence that you can follow. The interesting part out of this set was what was on the bottom, which was all the segment-based training, transactional, service, and manufacturing. And cost actually came as the very bottom one. Because at some level, if you're going to make a fundamental improvement in your business, that will far exceed in benefits what the cost is. And generally the biggest cost for a student is their time away from work, not the cost of the class anyway. Was there any surprises? It did a little to me, I admit. But every time you use these tools, they do push learning. And if you already knew the answer, you probably wouldn't be doing this anyway. So this comes to our next poll. We're about to wrap up here. Please keep entering questions as you have them. This was what was your role in picking a training provider? A number of you said you were looking for it. Are you going to make the decision? Do you get influence? Or are you just gathering data to pass on? Or in the bottom, what we always feel like we have no influence at all. We're just learning for ourselves. Please put in your choice. Looks like most of you are just information gatherers. This is a good way to do it. If interested in the end, the matrices that I talked about in here, and I got one more coming up, are just Excel sheets. If you inquire, you can get a copy of them. I just send them out to you. So here we go. Almost half of you are gathering information. Some are going to, a third can make a decision or influence the decision. That's great. So where do we go now? We've got a ranking. We've got them in order. Similar to what we just did on that prioritization, we're going to switch that little tool, the prioritization matrix, around to create a provider selection matrix. What we do is we distill down the priorities that came out of the columns or the rows in the prior analysis, put them on the top in columns, then we weight the importance to you or the organization, list the providers on the left-hand side or the rows, and score them the same way. This is what I pulled out of what we had there. The big issues have an experienced provider and instructors. In other words, they've been around a while. They're not fly-by-night. That also generally means that their certification is respected across the country. Next one, that they focus on a business system, not just how to solve a problem or run a project. They've got books, material, training that complements the workshop material. In other words, it's clearly referenced and useful. They've got a very good system for solving a project, such as a roadmap. They also include Lean Six Sigma and other tools. The top's ranking weight came with a high interaction of students and instructors. It leads to the practical nature and the ability to really understand the application if you get this interaction. It's very tough to do the application or the practical nature of projects when you have a impersonal interface such as a web-based or a self-learning tool. The ability to test your beliefs against the system with a discussion are powerful. Next, it should be practical and applied in nature with exercises, activities, and such to reinforce learning. And the last one we had was about a middle weight, has a single system that's efficient, that works for manufacturing, transactional, and I could add service, hospital, health, or whatever. But I am a believer there really is a problem-solving method that applies everywhere. And what you would do is you'd list the providers on the left, the ABC are in there now, and score how each one ranks against those. Sounds pretty simple from here, but as I finished this, I sat down with our office manager and looked at our websites. It'd be hard for us to even share how we fulfill those just from our standard marketing literature. Like all of them are, says, boy, we're everything to everybody. But the best I can give you is, you want to answer these questions, you lead direct questions with someone who's a provider. And if you get a chance, try to get an instructor to talk to, not necessarily a salesman. Not that salesmen aren't good, because I do it sometimes. But instructors can give you, if one of their lead instructors may give you better insight in this. So that's really the end of the Kaizen type event, to try to show you how you can take a list of ideas from a group of people and coalesce it down to a way to pick a provider. Of course, if you were to ask me right now, I know who I think the best provider is. Some of this is for us to sign up people, but at the same time, I would bet a good third of the people that call in are not a good fit for what we're providing. So hopefully you'll get a way to find the right tool for you, both for your business and for you. So what got us to what we're teaching today and what we see as the top tier? Six Sigma started years ago in the 80s with Motorola, a facilitator type system. Then came General Electric, which introduced the project-based stuff. Lean was almost in parallel, started with a Toyota production system, which is really a cultural system. It's wonderful for them. That led to what's called lean manufacturing, and now more recently lean enterprise, which is really focused on the removal of waste. Probably in the last 6, 7 years, both the Lean and the Six Sigma providers realized they were insufficient for a whole business system. So they joined the two together. Now, the first ones were, here's both training, pick the right one and work it. But they were trying to have a facilitator that knew both sets of skills. More recently, you'll find the very top courses, blended together so it is now a single process to solve problems that mixes the Lean and Six Sigma together. Because over my years, I've realized every project's got some of both tools, and there really isn't just one path, which leads to what we see as the top tier of them, where you actually have it's really more business performance improvement rather than a Lean Six Sigma course. And the goal is to drive the business ahead. So you spend more time talking about how the business relates to performance, how they measure it, to help in generating better projects and, I guess, benefit the business more. So what should you know that you didn't not know, or what does this say? Yeah, what would be nice to know that most people don't know when they're going into a black belt class? And these are the things we find the concern about at the end of a class, not at the beginning. Some of the biggest takeaways we see from students, and especially black belts, is the business side of it. Most of them have spent their whole career working on their area or their piece of the business. They never turned around and look upward to find out what's really going on. And the benefits of a black belt to gain that are wonderful. Those that do go a long ways in advancing their career and their business. So it's good to have a course that's quite more like a business course than an IT tools course, which really is, again, building the relationship between Lean Six Sigma and business goals and strategies. I know we had a whole section about scorecarding and performance metrics for the business to help students understand how projects are chartered and how they will see the impact of an improvement. So it should go beyond just doing projects and include scorecards. So that's really the heart of the content I wanted to cover today. I see we have a couple questions I'll read at the end. But just to go over what we did cover, we covered the key issues for a black belt provider. Most of those came from you. We talked about how to collect and rank these ideas because you can move the qualitative to the quantitative. And the final result is to make you more informed about what training you might want. Now here's a question. Why is Six Sigma not doing like PMI, having a standard body of knowledge, an official certification? Would ASQ be it? Well, again, PMI is like ASQ in the fact that it started out as an organization of practitioners that's become a certifying authority in a business in itself. I think the reason it is Six Sigma started out as a grassroots stuff of practitioners, and when the big wave hit, when the original people from Motorola and the first 4 or 5 companies left, each of them put out their own certificate on the wall and became consultants. There never was a single institute that you have to certify with to be a teacher. But I think that's because it really, and that honestly allows the Six Sigma world, and the Lean world has the same issue, to advance and improve faster. There is no body both holding it back so they make money off it. So what you speak of is true, but at the same time it probably allows it to change and improve faster because there is not a standard authority. But the best body of knowledge out there probably is the ASQ one they put out. When I've dealt with students that come from outside of the U.S., most of them only recognize ASQ because that's an organization they see as in their part of the world too. So a lot of folks, when they leave our classes, just go right out and take the ASQ exam and pass it. The problem with that is it's just a multiple choice test. They're always easier than having to really run a project. I hope I answered that. Next one, Lean Six Sigma providers should have many ways to assist those who are not employed where cost is much higher. Oh, cost would be a higher. And I know you're right. If you are not subsidized by an employer, it is tougher. That is something I would expect that all of the good providers out there make allowances for it. I know we do. There's about running any business. There's enough to cover your costs, and then you can deal with that differently. What you will find, though, is most all classes cost about the same, and it's usually a function of how long you're involved with an instructor. The online ones are cheaper because you don't take instructor time up, so the bandwidth is a lot higher. Shorter classes are cheaper. I think if you tried to do a regression equation from hours in class to cost, you'd find a very good correlation. The tough part, I mean, I know that Smarter Solutions does do a real nice thing for people that are out of work right now because of the way the economy and the way things are going. But again, you have to understand businesses are there to make enough money to cover their costs. No one wants to fail. But you're right. Cost just didn't come up, so it makes me think that most of the people here were doing it for their business. Next one. Will IEE, which I didn't speak too much, but that's what Smarter Solutions calls their business improvement program, be the next Lean Six Sigma or the next advanced one? Boy, that's a tough call. I'm telling you, the owner of the company would say yes. But generally, I believe what we are doing here will be what all the leading consultancies and companies that self-teach will all be moving towards, whether it's our spin of it or someone else's. But Lean and Six Sigma is an effort just to fix little problems. The big problems are gone. Now what we're finding, a lot of sub-optimization, trying to run a project to keep busy, and a lot of them have given up the relationship to business success, and I think that's what we're seeing now. Whether it's our mode, it'll be something like we're talking about either way. Next one. Isn't in-depth knowledge of Six Sigma more important than certification? Boy, good question. If your goal is to do good and to solve problems and help your business, of course. But I'll tell you, certification is very important to demonstrate to others what you can do. Consider the difference between being smart and having a bachelor's degree. You may know as much as someone else, but the act of having a bachelor's degree is like a certification. It does show you are able to complete a set of requirements, and that in itself, it shows something. I know I have this discussion with my son who's starting college this year. Well, what's a degree worth? And I think a lot of it's what it means to others. It's not, doesn't say you're good or bad, but it does say something. Next question. Does a participant lose anything from the training experience if they do a simulation rather than a real project? Well, I would say, yes, they lose something, because the tools to go through the math and collect data are the easiest part of a project. The real difficult part of projects are dealing with people. It's the behavioral side. You have to get people together. You have to pull ideas together. The whole idea of doing a brainstorming and an FMEA, having a design of experiments creation discussion, getting with the stakeholders to understand what it takes to make an improvement plan, I believe is the real benefit of a project. It's not the data analysis that's all you can really do from a simulation. We find more takeaways from our students about the people side of projects than the technical side. So I do think you lose a little bit. A good class will use certifications as part of their training, but they will not base certification on it. Next question. Is it important to have a project while attending a black belt class? I know I've covered a lot. I believe that a person that can manage a project that parallels the training will always do better, because they're going to learn something. And I say the general case, 1 week a month till you're done. You got 3 weeks between classes to try the stuff you were taught. You get to come back and say, here's what worked, why did it work, here's what didn't work. But you give the ability to learn by listening and doing, and then going back and right afterwards trying it. The half-life of that knowledge is extended. You're less apt to forget something that you walk out and try. Now, I have people successfully take the course and then start a project long afterwards, but that is an exception. Running a project in parallel to the course really enhances your learning. I think at some level it drives what you learn from the short-term memory into the long-term, so it sticks with you. Next one. In a transactional-oriented business, how much statistical training needs to be included, especially when most processes are not normal? Well, in my view, just as much. I think a lot of the simple Lean Six Sigma programs, and I'll say mine when I first learned it too, said if it's not normal data, you just go to these simple tools. And I think they shorted people with that. Most of the non-parametric tools and the just using graphs and such, it's really similar what TQM or total quality management was. And although they work, they are not as powerful of tools as you have. I have been in the transactional woodworking when I did with Bechtel. And boy, you still need t-tests. You still need regression. You still need all the same tools. Now, I'll admit you don't need the real advanced statistics, but you do need the first tier. And as we teach, you generally tell people how to deal with non-normal data so they can make control charts, so they can do a capability analysis and really understand where they are. Because I'll tell you, if you don't understand the non-normal and normal data, you don't know as much about your process that will help you improve it. So I think you do need, I think they short people when they don't teach the statistics. I did help with a company in San Antonio that their Greenbelt training had no statistics at all, not even add-ins to Excel. And yeah, the class was easy and it got great marks when you taught it. But these people struggled to make any proof at the end that their improvement was required. Without the statistics, it's very difficult for you to make a case with evidence for your leadership to adopt a change, especially if it doesn't fit what they already wanted. Next one, is Sigma XL enough to go to black belt training, or is it better to go in with Minitab? Now, I'm going to generalize Sigma XL as an add-in to Excel. It's got some nice menus to do basic statistics. It's one of many that are out there. Do they work? I mean, honestly, you can solve most projects with just the statistical add-in that has Excel. The advantage of Minitab and why the top tier groups use Minitab or JMP is because they have good help screens. They help you understand what you're doing. They keep you from making a lot of mistakes, but it keeps you from having to be a statistician. The problem with the Excel-based ones is they limit you to only the most typical of tools, normal distributions. There's a number of things they don't do that I find very valuable that both Minitab, JMP, and a real statistics program does. Just in the fact they analyze it and give you more outputs to understand what's going on. So I think you can, but generally you're shorted a bit if you don't go into the class with Minitab or another real statistical program. Otherwise, you have to learn a lot more statistics to be powerful when Minitab will just do it for you. Oh, and should add to that one. The one thing that it speaks to one of our competitors, but I would avoid any training program that's based on software that they wrote themselves, because chances are they're as much as anything they're selling the software. Just a personal view. Next one, can lean be measured? Of course. In our training, now the simple lean course is basically, I look at lean in its original state, that you base your improvement on best practices. Here's where I am, here's what's ideal, see how far I can drive it, and most of them did not measure change. Now, the top programs now ask for a baseline analysis of performance before, and then one afterwards. You measure the change and value it. And that's been a weak spot of lean for years in its early senses. Nobody judged its benefits. I remember I worked with a peer at a company we were merging, and he was a pure lean guy. At the time, I was pure Six Sigma. I was running 3 to 5 projects a year with excellent proof that I made a change. This guy did 50 projects as a Kaizen leader in the prior year, another master black belt, but it was hard for him to go back and say he made a difference, although everybody knew you did. So yes, you can, but that's the statistics that you have to add into it. Next one's limitations for online training, where it says, what are the key limitations? Online training, you either love it or you hate it at some level. Research we did on it as we were looking for an online course a number of years ago is that we see Lean Six Sigma as a business class, probably more than a tools class. Business schools were moving away from online or self-paced training because it's relationship-based. IT programs or IT providers are moving more and more to online courses because it's a good, solid way to teach skills as long as you don't have a relationship or a personal interaction issue. Now, I worked with last company to try to do what was blended with some online and some classroom work, it worked okay, but the students still needed the classroom work and am I right interaction with an instructor that we ended up dropping the self-paced stuff. I think the best practice out there today is these blended courses that you can hear about. We're trying to create one now, but it's not necessarily simple. They have an interaction of people to build the relationships, but some level of self-paced. In my reading, and this one I can't speak to on my own, but on the other downside of online courses is many businesses sign you up for an online course and require you to do it outside of normal work hours. So it ends up being an additional burden to your time, which most of us don't have a lot of. That's probably the other downside to it. I think that makes it our last question. That was a wonderful set. I really appreciate it. If you have further questions that come up afterwards, feel free. Since you've signed up for this, you can still email other questions, and I'll be glad to get to them. I think you're going to get an answer. We'll have this webinar posted in the future, so you can read through it. Because of signing up today, we're going to offer an individual $100 Visa gift card. If you want to get registered, just call into the number on there. That's our main number here. So if you get it by September 11th, and I know that's a day that we all remember, but don't remember it for that, and you'll get your card. We try to pick something that those of us that are sponsored by a business, if you give them a cheap hotel, it goes to the business, not the individual. So there you go. When you exit, you're going to get a thing pop up on there. It's going to have a couple of questions about the webinar. Appreciate you taking the time to answer. That is also where you can opt out for a follow-up call if you're so inclined. Thank you very much for your time. Again, this is Rick Haynes with Smarter Solutions, and I really hope you get a chance to go pick a black belt class. I find nearly every student I get, it changes their life at some level. It gives them another way to look at the world. They see variation and not just averages. And they end up using it well beyond running projects, even into their personal life. So it can be a very good thing for you. Good luck in your search.